Hi, I'm Terry. Today I'd like to show you how to make a tote bag using just half of a charm pack. The tote bag is lined on the inside and it also has a magnetic snap. So stick around and I'll show you how. I had this cute charm pack of 5-inch squares and I wanted to use it since it's a Halloween print and Halloween is next month already. I'm separating the squares into color groups. The back ones are kind of pink. I don't think I'm going to use those. There are some peach colors and green and black and some more kind of neutral ones towards the front of the pack that are more lighter and have this pretty rust color in there. I'm going to make some half square triangles to start with and see where that takes me. I really have no idea what I'm going to make at this point, so I'm just kind of looking through there to see if I get any inspiration. So I'm choosing fabrics that are a little bit different so they'll have a little bit of contrast. And I'm lining up the ruler in the center of the block of the square and marking lines 1/4 of a way of the center so I can stitch them. I'm using a Frixion pen so the marks come out when I iron it. I'm at the machine now, just stitching down on the lines that I marked with my Frixion pen. Once they're all stitched, then we just have to cut them in the middle and we end up with 2. Hey, and now we're all done. So I'm going to make a couple of blocks that are about 12 inches when we finish up. They're going to be 3 across and 3 down. Maybe you guys have the same problem like I do. Once I start sewing, I get all turned around and then I can't remember which pieces went together and where. So I'm putting a pin at the top of each row just so I know how they go. And I put sticky notes on them to keep track of the top, middle, and bottom, just so that I can keep them where I wanted them as I sew them along. So hey, my blocks are all done now. I pressed them and I'm going to make the quilt sandwich with the batting and the backing, and they're ready to go in the machine. I'm quilting this on my Juki sit-down long arm, but you can totally do this on a home machine. Just drop the feed dogs, set your stitch length to 0, and change out your foot to one made for free motion quilting, and you're ready to go. I also want to put a disclaimer here that I am not an expert at free motion quilting. I just kind of mess around and do whatever I feel like doing at the time. The most important thing to keep in mind when you're free motion quilting is just keep it consistent if you're going for an all-over design. It's going to be very noticeable if you have empty spaces with no stitching. Of course, if that's a design you're going for, then that's great. But empty spots will really show up after you wash it and it crinkles up. Sometimes I use quilting gloves, but they kind of make my hands sweaty, so I usually just go with my bare hands if I'm working on something small. I also like to use little pieces of the stuff I found at the dollar store to put under your rugs to hold them in place so they don't slip. I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but it has this little rubbery texture and just enough stick that it works really well to move your quilt around. I found that when you're quilting curves, that when you have to stop to reposition your hands, stop at a space that isn't a curve, like not right in the middle, and that way your circles will stay nice and consistent and you won't get these jagged little weird points. For the batting, I'm using Warm and Natural, and I just put muslin on the back because we're going to line this after it's done. And this pattern is just like drawing the letter C and then curving back around. I try and get the curves to alternate directions so they're not all going the same way. And if I run out of space and I don't have enough room to do another curve, I'll just echo around the shape that's there until I find a spot that's got enough space so I can make another little C shape and then come back around. I'm squaring up the blocks now. I like to save the extra little pieces of batting to use as stuffing for dolls or stuffed animals or things like that. And I'm actually going to be able to use some of these pieces in the purse handles later. For the applique, I'm using some wool blend felt. You can find this on Etsy. There are a lot of sellers there that carry it, all different colors and different blends. To get really nice shapes out of the felt, I'm going to attach some freezer paper to it before I cut it. Not only for a template, but it's so much easier to cut it this way. It gives it a nice smooth edge in my opinion. I'm drawing some of the shapes from the fabric, flowers, stars, and the moon. And I'm not the greatest artist in the world. It doesn't really matter as long as it's something like what's on the fabric. I love the little spider that's on the fabric too, that's hanging down from the moon, so I think I'll put that in there as well. I'll make the spider out of felt and then I'll do his legs and his web with some embroidery stitches. The shiny side of the freezer paper is what sticks to the fabric when you press it, and it only takes a really light press to attach it. It doesn't leave any sticky stuff on your fabric at all. It's really nice and you can actually reuse it over and over. To cut out the felt, I like to use my cutter bee scissors because they're really sharp and I don't want to use my fabric scissors on paper. I'll put a link down below if you want to see where I got them. I found that the trick to cutting felt, especially curves, is to move the felt and keep the scissors in the same spot. For me, it makes the curves come out really nice and smooth. I'm just using a simple stitch to sew the appliques on and then adding the buttons. I'm using some pearl cotton size 5 and a chenille needle. The pearl cotton doesn't tangle as much as embroidery floss, but you can use that as well too. The chenille needles have a bigger eye, so they're a lot easier to thread. And I know the back of my embroidery looks like a big cluster, but I'm not worried because it's not going to show when it's done. And I doubt anything is going to fall off with those big huge knots that I made. For the little spider guy, I'm marking where his little legs and his little web are going to go with my Frixion pen. And then I'm going to sew on his body first. His little legs are really small, so I'm going to sew those with only one stitch. And for the web hanging down, I'm going to do a simple back stitch. The blocks that I quilted are 12 inches square, and I cut the lining pieces the same size. I'm leaving an opening on the side to turn it right side out after it's done, and I'm leaving the top open because that's where I'm going to sew it to the outside of the bag. I really love these marking pencils I found on Amazon. They work really well on dark fabrics, and the marks iron right off just like a Frixion pen. They come in a box of 12, and I'll put a link to them down below in the description. So once you cut your 4-inch strips, you fold it in the middle and press it, and then you fold each side to the center and press that. Now we're going to put some batting in the middle of the handles, and I saved the scraps that I cut off the edge of my blocks when I did the quilting, so I'm going to use some of these because we only need 1 inch to put in the middle here before we finish our handles. So I think I have enough, and it doesn't have to be a continuous piece either. So I put the paper underneath so I don't get all the fuzzies in my cutting mat. We want to line this up on one side because our middle crease is right here. When we fold it over, we'll have a nice padded handle. So now I'm going to take it to the iron and press it this way. And then we're going to stitch along this edge and this edge for both handles. Once we've sewn the lining together with our little opening on the edge, and this is our bag sewn together, we're going to box the corners. So you may have your own favorite method of putting bags together. This is just one way that's easy for me to do. So you want to fold the corners, match up the seams. To see if your seams are matched up, you can always use a little pin and put that on the seam, and then check it on the other side. And then we're going to mark about 1 inch. About 1 inch in will give you about a 2-inch bottom for your bag. If we go 1 inch in, will be about right here. And we're going to sew it right there. Okay, so now that we have our little boxing corners stitched up, we're just going to trim them off just a little bit. Leave about a 1/4 inch, but just take a little bit of that extra off. So I'm going to turn this right side out. And I thought it would be nice to put a magnetic snap on. These are kind of nice because they keep your bag from opening up. So I cut a couple of pieces of batting just to help reinforce it. Now these come with little washers and little plastic, but they just have 2 little prongs that go through the fabric, and then these are opened up with the washer to reinforce it, and then they just kind of snap together with little magnets. They're kind of neat. So to find the middle of the bag, I'm going to be lazy and just fold it in half, and I'm going to do a tiny snip right there. And fold this one back, and then that should match. So this is going to go behind it. We're going to take our washer and line up that mark that we made right in the middle. And then I think this is going to be too big to make a mark. Maybe not. Hey, that worked out. So that's where we want to make the hole for the snap to go in. And the hole is going to have to go through our little piece of batting as well. So with the seam ripper, very carefully, so that you don't get your fingers, just make a tiny little hole. On each of these lines. Put our washer down. All right, I can't bend this one at all, so. And there we go. Our handles are sewn on the edges about a 1/4 inch in all the way down. So to attach these, just want to make sure that they're not twisted. Let's see, let's go 1.5 inches from the edge, 1.5 inches here to the edge of the handle. It's going to be right here. I'm just going to use my other handle as a guide. All right, so I'm going to stitch it here, and then we'll sew the lining in. Outside of the bag is right side out. Our handles are all the way scooched in at the bottom. Our lining is right side out, so we want right sides together when we sew this around the top. So we're going to look for the side seams and match those up. Match up the side seams. Okay, now we're going to sew it all the way around the top. So we've sewn it all the way around the top. Now all we have to do is pull the lining out, and we're going to look for that little opening that we left, and we're going to turn the whole thing right side out. So now all we have to do to finish this up, we need to sew this little piece together that's open and just do a top stitch around the top. You can hand sew this part if you want to. Since it's the lining, I do it on machine because it doesn't show. So I'm going to take this and stitch it right around there. And I'm also going to fold this in. And I'm going to do a little top stitch around the edge, and be careful not to hit the snap, but we have plenty of room right there. So this is how it turned out. So if you found some inspiration today, please hit like and subscribe if you want to see more videos. Thanks for watching. See you next time.